Good morning to everybody. We a little short-staffed here, but we do have enough to start. Um, so if we can, we'll start with our invocation and then our Pledge of Allegiance, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you continue to watch over us all and guide us in making decisions that are beneficial to everyone in our town. Bless and protect our police officers, first responders, staff, and keep them safe as they work each day to serve this community. We pray for John Kaufman's wife, who is having surgery this morning, Jenny Mount's daughter, who is having medical issues this morning, and of course we pray for Ernie's family for the loss of his dad. We ask that you bless all of us, especially during this Christmas season. In God's name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. This is the period for first public comment period. Anybody who wants to talk about things that are not on the agenda? Hearing none. Do I have an approval of the agenda?
Approve the agenda.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from November 14th?
I'll motion.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very, very good. Okay. So I think we'll move it right on over to the old business. Philip, you're on.
So, consideration before you is to approve a resolution transferring ownership of parcel 0738107 from the Town of Tyrone to the Downtown Development Authority. This is, of course, the fire station. We've been through this one before, so I won't go through the staff report, but I will just note that the one thing that we kind of got us held up a little bit established was this easement on the back. That easement is a sewer easement and multi-use path easement because we plan, the town plans in the future to do a project back there. We also need the sewer line protected by an easement if it's a transferal of ownership outside of the town. So we established that easement, so everything from basically 10 feet north of the sewer line and 40 feet south of the sewer line is part of a sewer and multi-use path easement. We may adjust some of this later as well as we get into the path project, but that may be some time down the road, perhaps a year or more. So we wanted to establish this just so that we could get this into a situation that was suitable from a legal perspective, and so the town could continue with that project, and so that the DDA can continue with whatever you want to do with the project without worrying about that sewer line down there. So staff does recommend approval of the resolution to accept the property with this easement present on the property.
All right, so that area there, just for my own edification, that's been separated from the deed?
It's been added to the deed that, the property.
There's an easement there.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, you would retain the property with that easement.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
Can that be paved?
Yes, yeah, the path can be paved. We offset you can see we offset the easement so that we're not paving over the sewer line, which you can do. I mean, they put sewer lines in the middle of roads all the time, but it's preferable if you have the flexibility to not do that. So the multi-use path would be situated in the center of that 40-foot easement, probably 12 to 14 feet wide, and that gives enough separation from the sewer line so that you can just have easy access, maintenance access to the sewer line as well.
And in the future, can we, if that's a path, can we put golf cart parking down there?
Sure.
Is that possible?
Yeah, that's actually part of the thought process for that path being back there, is to have essentially double frontage for these properties that's pedestrianized and golf cart frontage. So bike racks, golf cart parking spaces, sidewalks that maybe lead up to the properties. That's all kind of part of the thought process of utilizing that space back there.
That currently in the easement there on Shamrock's property?
Yes, there's currently an easement there. That easement was established, since this was a town property, no easement was put on it originally. All the private property owners that were involved have an easement. It's not the same easement. It's
But
only.
it's close enough to, yes,
Yeah,
suffice for.
I think it's only like a 20-foot easement, just sewer easement on those other parts of the property. When the town gets involved in the actual path project, we'll have to negotiate with those property owners, but that's when we start that project, which could be a little ways away. So we just decided to make sure that this was teed up, for when that happens, so that it doesn't have to come before you again.
Right, okay.
I'll try to take it easy on us.
Now, the bottom,
Thank you.
bottom part of this picture here, did we have any setback for the pond or the wetlands back there?
So, there is typically a setback. It's usually a building setback. When it comes to transportation-related projects like paths and things, they're usually exempt as long as we're doing proper mitigation measures. It's a man-made wetland as well. It's not necessarily a natural wetland. So there's some different conditions that come with that. But yeah, we still should be fine even with some of those setbacks.
As far as, what about clearing and that type of thing?
In the woods and things like that. Yeah, we would probably, if anything happened there, I think the path would be outside of the tree line currently, just in terms of where it would be placed. If there's any work to be done in that that wetlands area, it would probably just be to thin out the wetlands. So take out undergrowth,
Right.
maybe limb up trees and things like that, so you get a clear view into the lake. But yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
I have a question, not a hold-up question, but who's gonna maintain the property? Do we
So-
need to have a workday once a month, or?
Yeah, to maintain, so in terms of maintaining the path and the infrastructure, that would be the town. That's what the easement establishes. So anything that's within that easement, that would be on the town. In terms of getting back onto like the wetlands area and doing any extra work, that would be the DDA, although we have a thought, at some point to perhaps as we move along and depending on the scope of the path project, to see if it would be suitable to simply chop off this back part of the property to give to the town, because it's really all about maintenance. It doesn't necessarily provide, any kind of additional land value to the DDA, so that the whole back portion of the property belongs to the town. That would be something we maybe approach later. We just wanted to make sure that we got this into a stable situation, we got this done. We got a lot of projects going on, so it was good to just be able to put this one into this phase where it is. But that's a discussion that we are considering having for later, is that literally from where that easement starts, the 10 feet north of the sewer line, all the way back, that just gets absorbed into the park. And then at that point, it would be the town that would perform any maintenance.
And by having the reduced size, would it limit us on future growth of that if we needed?
No, the flexibility for downtown, lot size flexibility is high, so that it wouldn't affect the buildability of the property. It would simply be that back portion that's not really buildable
Yeah,
to
we
begin with, so I don't think it would affect that in any way.
Perfect.
Thoughts? That's what I was asking about, like, who's gonna cut the grass?
So,
and take
so
the-
right now,
Oh, sure.
Abby cuts it as part of our contract with
Uh-huh.
them. As far as I'm concerned, that relationship won't change at this time. I think once something's in the building and the DDA is making revenue off the building, and maintains ownership, then we may have to look at it differently. But, the general lawn maintenance that's going on right now, it should
Stays the same.
continue at least for now.
Okay, thank you.
Once we do something with the building, I imagine the landscaping is gonna be to a much higher standard, so we'll probably come up with a maintenance plan for that.
Would someone like to make a motion to, regarding the resolution of the ownership of that parcel? That. A motion to approve?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the resolution transferring the ownership of parcel number 0738107 from the Town of Tyrone to the Downtown Development Authority of Tyrone. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that being said, let's see, Philip, we don't have anything else. I have a question or a thought anyway, in lieu of all of this. I think it would be, I would sincerely like to have all of the committee members here part of that. And we've yet to, as a group, and I know we can't do that, with the problems of the sunshine laws, to having everybody there at once. I'd like you guys to figure out how we can set up, sitting us down in a couple different sections so that we can discuss whatever possibility, what we want to do going forward, and what our possibilities are, so that we don't have to have a public meeting. And I gather that there's also some direction that, that is potentially for us, right, going forward with this. And that's another thing that, that we need to discuss, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been, and definitely in light of what, now that the property is yours, we are, we've been investigating and building some relationships with different entities. Brandon and I just had a conversation with the Georgia Cities Foundation and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. They have some low-interest loan options. We want to be able to gather all of that information, any additional types of entities that would be able to help us. And yes, we'd love to be able to sit down with groups of you just to kind of go through some of that. We'll, of course, be bringing it to public meetings as we get closer to kind of brainstorming on some of those opportunities and options. So that's something that we're currently working on right now. So we do we do have a lot more information on Georgia Cities Foundation and Georgia Department of Community Affairs and some of their grant programs. They actually they took a look at the property. It seems to me that it's something that is very achievable. They're like, oh, this is definitely a project that qualifies for something that we'd get involved in. That being the case, then we're going to probably get some more information and bring it to y'all about what that looks like.
And I think that's important, and I think it would be good at some point, the sooner the better, that we have some sort of a walkthrough there. Most of us have. I mean, I've been through there, and I'm sure Ernie has as well, but others have not. And I would like everybody to see and how this relation with the easement, where that sits on there, so everybody kind of gets a visual picture of what we're dealing with.
I'd be happy to put that on offer anytime any of the individual or group, not quorum member, a group of y'all want to do it, just call me up and we'll just go over there. We'll walk through it.
Good. Does
Yeah,
that work for you guys?
I think that'd be great.
Sierra, that works for you? I apologize to those here. If I can revert back to that, thank you for that. This is the second public comment period, which is a topic so you can talk about anything that is or is not on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move forward. Okay, was
I do
there?
have a question.
Yes, please, Ernie.
In regards to the fire station now, or the building itself, moving forward, how does just Madam Hill's here, so she brings different movie or TV.
We actually skipped over staff comments. I actually have several notes.
Okay, good. All right.
So, if we could,
You'll probably answer it then.
if we could get back on the agenda.
All
we'll
righty.
Cover some of that.
So I apologize for that. Let's go to staff comments. Anybody have any staff comments?
I think Brandon has a few.
I have a couple. As Philip mentioned, we did meet with Georgia Cities Foundation and the DCA last week. That meeting was actually put together by Nikki Vanderslice from the Fayette County Development Authority. She has been working very hard on a few things for Tyrone, so I just want to publicly thank her for that, and I've certainly done that in private, but. So we are working towards figuring out funding options, and it's just a numbers game. We're going to have to see what the numbers look like, because there's three entities that are going to be involved if you go the loan route. The Fayette County Development Authority, possibly, Georgia Cities Foundation, and the DCA. The DCA, Georgia Cities Foundation, the max they can loan is $250 apiece.
$250,000?
Right.
Okay.
Their interest rate is in the threes. And we're also assuming that, you know, and we, you know, it's still too early to know exactly how the FCDA is gonna handle funding when it comes to things like this, but I think we can assume that their funding rate's gonna be somewhere in the threes as well. So we've gotta look at, you know, what's this gonna cost? What kind of money are we borrowing? And, what are the numbers gonna look like? Is it even feasible to go that route? But it's a lot of stuff to think about, which brings me to my next point. I know that you all would like input on, planning for First Fridays and other events, and you also, we need to be able to talk to some of y'all offline about, and we need guidance when it comes to funding and what we're gonna do with buildings. My suggestion is that you all establish two committees, one being the finance committee, the other being the event or planning committee. My suggestion for finance would be Mr. Campbell, Mr. Johnson, and Ms. McDuffie, just because of their backgrounds. And please don't take that as a slight. It's just, we've got, Lucy in the finance industry. The chairman, I think, is obvious, and then Ernie's from, real estate. And that is just a suggestion from staff. You all can do whatever you want to do. And then whoever on the planning, but that way you have three members, you don't have a quorum. We can meet with you all can be present on site when we have meetings with DCA or whoever. One or all three of you, whoever's on the committee, can be there. You hear it firsthand. Do you have?
Those are still open.
Okay.
Be aware, when you establish a committee like that has any authority at all.
Doesn't matter that we have less than a quorum.
So define authority. If they're just, there to hear information from someone we're meeting with and discussing ideas, they're not making decisions. What?
Well, that's the problem. In an abundance of precaution, anything like that. Okay, so what happens is this body transfers any amount of authority to discuss, talk about business. That's still an authority.
Okay, well, welcome to local government. If anybody wonders why we can't get anything done.
It's all Ally's fault.
So scratch that, unless you just want to make it that way, and we'll do it officially. But what I was trying to do is make it easier for us to have, and what we can do then is maybe when we have a meeting with DCA or whatever, we'll just announce it, and one or two of you can come. Does that work?
Yeah, I think
That way, at least a portion of you all, my goal is for a portion of you all to hear it from the horse's mouth as we're meeting with these folks, and it not always coming from staff, because we always interpret it differently from how you'll interpret it and all that. So it's always good for at least a few of you all to hear what we're doing.
And Ally, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we can in the formation of a committee, in terms of how you guys meet, it's subject to open records, but I still think it can be a more nimble kind of operation. It's simply a matter of advertising that a committee of the DDA is meeting wherever. It doesn't even have to be regularly scheduled in this building, live streamed, all of that. Sierra would just be present to take minutes. We could meet at the building. We would be advertising that through our typical channels. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it is still a more nimble, I think, means of us being able to have these discussions. And we'd be publishing, the minutes from those subcommittees, but they wouldn't be recorded, live streamed in like this building at regular times. They can just be.
But it would allow the public, if they so desired, I mean, other than Melissa, that would allow them, give them the opportunity to be at the firehouse, or at the building when we're having that meeting.
But there doesn't need to be a formal agenda, public open, public comment period.
No.
It's just that if they wanted to, and we said the finance subcommittee's meeting at the fire station to discuss blah, blah, blah. they're there for our discussions, we're taking
Notes.
notes, and we're publishing, some. Still, I think a little bit more of a nimble type. But I mean, we can discuss if that looks different, but
What's our
And live
notice?
streaming is always
A
optional.
week
Yeah.
notice or a 2-day notice?
I think
of a meeting.
24 hour.
Yeah.
24 hours?
It's a called meeting, so you would treat it like a called meeting of a piece of the
Right.
authority.
Okay.
But if you're making a plan to meet somewhere to discuss business, it needs just so that there is never a question about what's going on.
But
That may be
to make it an
preferred,
open meeting, it just has to be
climate of
advertised on the website, correct?
the town and all of that, and people wondering what's happening, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's always the err on the side of, of transparency. My goal for suggesting the committee was not to, skirt anything, it was just to make it simpler for members of the board to hear and to attend these meetings that Philip and I are at, and hear these things, firsthand.
You guys
So-
can always have a called meeting.
Is it can we
Anytime
just
you
say,
want to. You just say, hey, we're
January
meeting?
6th, it's a meeting, and can we advertise it within 24 hours? Is that the notice time on the website? And the website
You
counts?
need to post the door, that kind of stuff, where you're meeting.
Okay.
I think, Sierra takes care of that right now, don't you? All of the notice postings. So
Sounds
she-
relatively.
It sounds like we could get it, not to
You
get
have a
away,
lot
but I
of
mean, just say as long as, hey,
flexibility to
we all are available on the 6th, and let's
Yes.
put it out there.
Yes.
And we're all gonna meet at
You
the
can
station or
meet
wherever.
whenever you want to, wherever you want to. It's a called meeting.
Okay.
You just have to make sure you have the publication and the minutes taken. Live stream even here isn't required.
Okay.
Perfect. We don't even have to have it in, like, if it's just three of us, we go to the conference room. That's how the transportation committee, something formed by the county. It's a much more informal feeling that you just meet in the conference room, maybe one or two. But it's meant for transparency and being a little bit more of an
Right.
informal setting. Somebody's taking some minutes, but
Right.
Meet in the conference room, leave the door open.
yeah.
It's open.
But creating the finance committee and the event planning committee, I still think would be a good idea.
I mean, if y'all wanna
yeah.
do that, it's not a heavy lift, we
No.
can make it happen, so.
And what it does for me, or at least I'm thinking that it makes us all more inclusive and keeps everybody that's here engaged in what's going on and to have a purpose, and that's really what we want to do. And then whatever we do, we just publicize, that's all.
Right, and then
And
those
just-
committees can make recommendations back to the body.
Right.
And they make the decision as a whole, and everything is just open.
And it would still allow any committee member to come to the finance meeting and/or the event planning meeting, just that they would be, bystanders in the other ones. Does that work?
Our Christmas committee is advertised.
Oh.
Maybe put on the website, so.
Yeah, there we go. So, okay.
So that's something that you don't have to make a decision on right now.
Yeah.
We can bring that up at a future meeting, but just something I wanted to get out there. I'm glad Allison, put that out there as well. I said your full name just because it's staring at me on your name tag. But.
You're in trouble when he calls you by your full name.
Thank you for clearing that up. That's why we have our attorneys. And then, to Mr. Johnson's point, earlier, I was gonna ask, when the town bought the building, from the county for $5,000 several years ago, we have more than recouped that money by allowing people to film there.
Right.
And between now and whenever we decide to, do something with that building, whatever we land on, I am sure we may get some requests. I wanted to know what the board's thoughts were on how we treat that building, because it no longer falls under the town's filming permit policy. So I need to know what to tell people when they come to us wanting to look at that building, to film in that building, because any money that is paid comes to the DDA. So I need some direction on that from the board.
Well, a few things. Liability wise, or what's our insurance on any kind of damage? To us, to them, to the building itself.
Additional insured certificate, I imagine.
Yeah, so they'll have their own, and we've got to verify that. I'm sure the contracts are there. I know that it was a sweetheart deal because it's a non-performing asset for the town then, but for us now, it's a non-performing asset for us. So we can have it, generate some income.
And, you know, if everything goes right, you're only talking about a short amount of time
Yeah,
before
hopefully.
this thing's
Right.
in,
Right.
you know, in the works. But under the town's policy, if somebody were to have come to me last week wanting to film there, I can only charge them $500 a day.
Right.
You guys can charge them $5,000 a day,
Right.
whatever you want to do.
Probably be willing to pay.
And some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably increase a little bit.
Right.
Keep the rest status quo except for the.
But how do we have a meeting, so Madam Hill she'll get a notice today that they want to be there next week. That's not time for us to gather. Can we do an emergency call?
Well, so,
or-
yeah, but if
Okay.
you give me guidance now,
Okay.
and you all agree, you have a quorum, then that's the guy. If you say we'll allow film productions to rent it for this amount a day, that's the policy, that's what we're gonna do, you guys vote on it. That way you're not having to be involved every time, because,
Right.
under the town's policy, if somebody wants to rent this room, I can sign off on that as long as, it's not interfering with court or whatever. So that way, it keeps you all from having to meet, but we have guidance on what we can allow, what we can't allow, all of that, so.
Pretty much been $500 a day consistently.
Typically, and Ms. Hill has brought us people who are willing to pay more, but because it's an official town ordinance, I'm not allowed to, really
Yeah.
go above that, because the ordinance says $500 a day.
If you're,
Can we base it on a production size? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the town's ordinance needs adjustment. I mean,
Right.
we're gonna do
Right.
that.
Simple enough.
Yeah,
Starting at
we'll do
$500
that.
a day, and then we'll just, probably good at that by now.
if we're gonna negotiate, we'll need to be able to authorize, either we'll have to have a called meeting of the board to finalize a negotiated amount, or, you would authorize, town staff to be able to, your staff to be able to negotiate that. It might be helpful to have a set amount maybe at a later meeting, but we can, just for the purposes of going forward now, we can establish the $500 minimum, and then at our next meeting, we can have that as an agenda item for everybody to vote on. Does that sound?
I think if they vote today on and Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, if they say at least $500, and I have a film production and they say, we'll give you $1,000 a day,
We're not gonna say no.
yeah, I don't think we need
Okay.
additional
Yeah.
approval for that.
So if we can
Because
all
it's-
agree on a
Good morning,
minimum of
Lucy.
500 a day, if you can get that for us, then
Right.
if we can all agree today,
Yeah.
we'd be happy with that.
With what, $1,000
But
a day?
If we just set a minimum,
Minimum of 500 a day.
500 a day, and say, we're all okay with it.
Yeah,
If they can negotiate
But
more.
if they can get more, then we're also okay with that.
and I agree with Melissa in the sense that I think you have to leave it open-ended. Starting at is a good thing to do, because then that gives us the ability, and correct me if I'm wrong, to increase it if we all decide. And then, that being the case, so we're gonna set, if we have a starting at price, then you're gonna end up making that decision as to what the final number is? Is that how that's gonna work? Or do you need to have a phone conversation or like?
If you say minimum 500 and I get a film, because a lot of times it's not like they'll come in and they'll say, we're willing to pay $1,000 or whatever, they'll-
Right, I
they'll-
understand.
I'm gonna accept that all day long
Yeah, okay.
for you guys.
Just so that you have some guidelines to go by, and
Right.
you're not gonna, the guy says 750 and you say, no, it's only 500.
Yeah,
I
no,
know,
think
I
we
know
have
you
to-
wouldn't do that.
Yeah, no.
I think we have to err on Melissa's expertise in the industry too.
Yeah.
She'll know based on who she's dealing with and the budget of the production itself. So she'll kind of have to guide us on that. But like Brandon says, if they come along and say, hey, we'll give you $1,000 a day, here's where you sign, Right? Yeah.
If I may just take a moment, Lucy, thank you. That's okay. It's been fairly brief so far. We did have the consideration to approve the resolution to transferring the property. We were here, we all voted yay for that, so just so that you're aware of that. And then since then, we've been kind of discussing, you know, there's an easement that's involved in that property, which you can see on the screening there. We've talked about getting together as in individual groups to go take a walkthrough, to talk, you know, to actually see the building. And Philip's gonna, you know, and we can do that through Philip. You can do that singularly, or we can do that with a few of us to go over there as long as we don't have a quorum. So that's basically
And this
been.
discussion you just had was rent?
Yeah, if utilizing.
Yeah,
the
Philip,
facility.
Philip, I'm sorry. Brandon had brought up the fact that since it's now in the DDA's name, that any filming would then have to be approved by us. So the town staff was looking for some sort of guidance, because they're not gonna come to us, they're gonna come to the town, continue with that. So we are now going to have it worded that starting at $500 a day. So if somebody was to come in and offered Brandon
Yes.
$800, $900, $1,000 a day, he's got the authority. Him and Philip would have the authority to approve that, and, you know, until we're ready to start breaking ground, so with,
Right.
for a lack of a better word, you know, on that. We also talked about getting together in small groups to talk about where we want to go with this building now that it's here with us. And I know there's been some talk, there's a couple potential suitors, if you will, on that. So I just want everybody to be inclusive on this. We also just briefly touched about creating a finance committee and a event planning committee. And it's been suggested by staff that the three of us, Ernie, yourself, and me, would be on the finance committee. And then we would create an event planning committee for all our First Fridays and so on and so forth. Okay? So, and then there was just a little legalities about when the groups meet, that we just have to make it public to everybody, because they are still gonna be a registered meeting. And we can't meet, even though there's only three of us, or three of, you know, the other group, we need to announce that. Okay, does that kind of update everything?
That was a good update. Probably like Sierra's minute.
Minutes done.
Well, so to close out the filming discussion, I mean, if you guys want to, if you're comfortable with that, I just need I need a motion that, yes, we're allowing this for filming. We're allowing people to film, and the minimum daily price is $500 a day.
All right, so if I can make a motion that we will still allow the property mentioned here for filming purposes, with the caveat that until we have actual contracts in progress with, you know, building it out, and we're gonna leave it to the staff, AKA Brandon and Philip, to make that determination as to what that daily rate would be. So that's my motion.
$500 minimum.
With a $500 minimum, right? Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we've jumped around a little bit, only because we get excited, and I did want to mention too that Philip and Brandon have met with the Georgia Cities Foundation, and they have discussed potential loans for us, okay? And Brandon can give you, you know, did you want to expand on that just a little bit,
Just that, you know, like I say, it's something that we're gonna have to figure out actual workable numbers before we figure out if it's even feasible to go
Right.
with the route that we've talked about. Because you're talking about dealing with three separate entities to get the kind of funding that we're gonna need to renovate that place and make it what we have envisioned. And so you're talking about, you know, three different loans, you know, somewhere around the 3% range on the rate. But then we haven't even looked at the bonding option. And so, you know, that's something else that we need to keep in mind, is that it is possible. Something else that we have to keep in mind is if at some point you know, so we've got the fire department the fire station now, and you know, we have a successful project there. And let's just say the town at some point decides to allow the DDA to do something similar with the former police station. Well, there are caveats when it comes to these funding programs that, one of them, I think it was Georgia City's, or DDA, the DCA, sorry, there's a lot of acronyms. The DCA, requires a project, 3 years between loans?
3 years.
So if you have one thing going on and it's successful, then you have to wait 3 years before you can apply for another. And you also have to keep in mind that the DDA cannot bind the town to, like, in other words, the town basically can't co-sign or can't back funding with our taxing power. That was something that we got clarification on last week. But so you guys are essentially kind of on your own when it comes. It's not that the town can't, vote to provide funding for things, but in a scenario that we discussed with DCA and Georgia City's Foundation last week when we were meeting at the fire station, let's just say because these are gap loans. So, if it's $1 million project, the DDA's got to find $100,000. And we know we don't have that right now. But, that might be something that the town would look at, because we do have money that we're looking at in ARPA and other areas for economic development. So that could be something that the town looked at and say, okay, we're gonna put this money over here for economic development purposes to make this happen, because it's important for the town. So there's a lot to consider with this.
Are you,
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
are you saying that we just have to have like a excess fund available to back that loan?
Basically, you have to cover 10%
Okay.
of whatever, if you go that route.
You have to keep it in a reserve?
Yeah, so what I would advise is that, let's just say we do some sort of loan program for that building. I don't know what your revenue is gonna turn out to be, what your net's gonna be after you pay your loan
Pay loans
payments and
off.
all that. And they're only 15-year notes as well.
Right, yeah,
So,
10 to 15, yeah.
So, you gotta do the math on that. You figure if it's $1 million, 15 years at, 3 to 3.25%, yeah.
Yeah.
So you gotta do the math. You gotta figure out, are we just breaking even? Are we, so a lot to think about. That's why I suggested a committee. That's why I suggested, all that, so that people can be present. We can talk about these things in detail without having to have a full meeting and that, because it's a lot. It's going to be a lot of discussion going over the next few months before we decide, exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah, and private capital is part of the discussion as well. So
Say that again, Phil. I'm sorry.
private capital. So
There you go.
whoever we negotiate with, of course, we're going to want to establish, long-term, lease payments and different things like that. But then if there's some upfront capital that they're able to offer as a part of, making that deal happen. Again, we're talking about, and this is like incredibly rough math that I did, but a startup business is going to be very difficult to make this happen. An established business that we're trying to pursue that's already paying pretty high rents and they're trying to, just maybe, do something different. I think that's definitely the direction we want to pursue if we went in this area. So, those are all parts of the discussion that I'm sure we'll be having over time.
That reminded me of something too. They also established, talking about startups, the Georgia Cities Foundation prefers established entities, which we've already kind of talked about. And when it comes to restaurants, they even mentioned they prefer relocations over startups, and they also prefer third locations over second locations. But if you've got a successful second location, there's more probability you're third.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
can
kind of
prove it,
interesting
you can scale it.
conversation, but they definitely do not love the idea of startups, and that wasn't somewhere we were wanting to go either. So
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that doesn't.
With GCF, you mentioned the 3-year eligibility for another loan. Is that for another loan through GCF, or are they making you put a cap on your borrowing for 3 years?
it's just another. It was DCA, and it was you had to wait 3 years between applying for a loan.
With them?
With them, yes.
So they're not trying to, they're not asking for us to limit our, liabilities.
No, that's between you all and your lenders. Yeah, they're just saying they won't back a loan until 3 years have passed.
So what you're suggesting is if we went to another party to gather a loan, that we would be able to get that.
Right, right. I know some lenders, they're, you know, high stakes, they're gonna come in and affect your future borrowing power with other lenders. They're gonna say, hey, if we're gonna give you this loan, you can't borrow from anyone else. I just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that type of scenario, but that's a good question.
All righty. Anybody else with staff comments? Board comments, any thoughts? Okay. Any need for executive session? Okay. If that's the case, do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So adjourned. Thank you all.
I know we're closed out, but I just want to make sure everybody, I should have mentioned this.